Welcome to the Femme Fatal, a true crime podcast with an astrology twist. I'm your host, Stacey Dotson. Each week, I'll be joined by a guest host because this Femme Fatale prefers not to work alone. Welcome back to the Femme Fatal. This episode falls during Pride Month. And as someone who celebrates Pride every single day, I want to acknowledge something important before we begin. The media dubbed today's subject the Lesbian Vampire Killer, a label that was sensational, exploitive, and impossible to separate from the headlines that followed. Her sexuality became part of the spectacle, but LGBTQIA+ people are exactly that, people. Complex, flawed, extraordinary, ordinary, heroic, and sometimes capable of terrible things. Tonight's story isn't an indictment of a community. It's the story of one woman, one horrific crime. Today we are talking about Tracey Wigginton. And I'm talking with my good friend Kay, who you all know by now. Hi, Kay.
Hi, Stacey. How's it going?
It's going good.
Love the Cheap Trick t-shirt.
Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to jump in. Tracey Wigginton, also known as the Lesbian Vampire Killer. She was born August 4th, 1965 in Australia. So this whole story takes place in Australia. August 4th, 65, that means she's a Leo. Tracey was born to Bill and Rhonda. Rhonda was the daughter of a lady named Avril. According to Rhonda, Avril, Tracey's grandma, did not approve of her marriage to Bill and made it her mission for that marriage to end. And it was successful. At the age of 3, Rhonda and Bill split up. And Tracey was adopted by her grandma, Avril, and her grandpa, George. I don't know why. You're going to see this theme a couple of times in this story, but mom and dad divorced. So Bill and Rhonda divorced. And then Rhonda's like, I can't take care of this child. I'm a single parent, and gives her up for adoption to the grandparents. I'm not sure why you have single parents all the time doing this, but whatever. Avril and Bill were wealthy and could take care of a child, so I guess it just made sense.
Maybe it did.
And so mom, she ended up moving away, getting married, and starting a whole new family, and didn't have contact with Tracey or much contact with Tracey until Tracey was 16. Tracey grew up with the grandparents in Rockhampton in northern Australia.
Honestly, I've only heard Avril before for Avril Lavigne. I've never heard anybody else named Avril.
Well, here you go. Here's your second dose of Avril. I saw an early childhood picture of Tracey when she was maybe 3, 4, 5, and she was just your average cute little girl, normal looking. She went to a prestigious school, it sounds like a prep school, and lived the life of a privileged kid. But later stories came out that the grandparents were abusive, both physically and sexually.
So many stories that we tell start out this way. It's terrible.
It is terrible. And it will impact her later life, as you will see. So the grandparents, Avril and George, they also adopted another girl named Michelle. Grandma was physically abusive towards both Tracey and Michelle. And she would, again, this is Avril, she would beat Michelle in front of Tracey. And she had 2 male friends that hung around Avril quite a bit. And they would also beat Michelle. Michelle would also be forced to sleep outside with the dogs. Neither of the girls, neither Tracey nor Michelle, were allowed to have any friends. So they had no people coming over to the house. As a result of this horrible upbringing, Michelle ran away from home. And at the time she was 15 and Tracey was 8. So Tracey was left to fend for herself.
Ugh. So I'm sure things did not get well for her then. It got worse.
They got worse for poor Tracey. Avril repeatedly beat Tracey. She would beat her with the cord from an iron, like a clothes iron. George, again, was the grandpa, and Avril hated him. So she hated her husband. She loved her little Chihuahua dogs, but she hated her daughter and she hated her husband. According to Rhonda, again, Tracey's mom, Avril hated men, period. Rhonda said Avril was a manipulative and very angry woman. She said, quote, "To us, a man was a dirty thing." She was very Victorian in her outlook. She said that attitude especially rubbed off on Tracey later in life. Tracey said George sexually abused her for 3 years, from like age 8 to 11, something like that. And then she also claimed both Avril and George were into the occult. So they were into things like spiritual tarot cards and Ouija boards, stuff like that. George died of cancer in 1979, and then Avril died in 1981. And at this time, Tracey was 16. And prior to her passing, Avril told one of those previously mentioned two men that would hang around the house. Oh, and by the way, Avril and George hated each other so much. Avril lived in a house. George lived in a completely separate house. He had his own house.
Were they next to each other or something?
They weren't next to each other. They were just two separate houses. That's my understanding.
Tracey just, I guess, went between the two of them?
I guess so. So George had his lady friends on the side, and Avril had these two male friends that would come over quite a bit. So Avril told them, "Before I die, I want you to make sure you keep disciplining Tracey after I'm dead," which made me think that she was going to live with these two men. I don't know for sure. But upon her death, Avril's death, one of the males was beating Tracey, and she fought back. And fought back so hard that he ended up in the hospital with some major head wounds. So at that time, Tracey decided to go live with mom, Rhonda. So she's 16. She has moved in with Rhonda and Rhonda's husband and her little sister, Allie. So Tracey's 16 at the time. I believe Allie was 8. I could be wrong on that. Anyway, little sister. Oh, and Tracey inherited 155,000 Australian dollars. This was in 1981 when Avril died. And I looked up the comparison of Australian dollars to US dollars. According to AI, if you had 155,000 Australian dollars in 1981, its purchasing power in 2026 would be worth about 798,000 Australian dollars when adjusted for inflation. And today, 798,000 Australian dollars equals 562,000-ish US dollars. So it was a big chunk of change.
Isn't worth all the abuse and beatings she took, but
It is not. That is horrible. I'd rather be poor and happy.
yes.
So again, she's living with Rhonda, her mom, and Allie, and Allie's dad. Tracey and Rhonda fought a lot because Rhonda could not accept the fact that Tracey was a lesbian. That was not acceptable to Rhonda. Little sister Allie recounts that when Tracey came to live with them, she taught Allie how to burn ants with a magnifying glass.
Oh,
That's so cruel.
I remember kids doing that though when I had a
know.
flashback or something, deja vu to remember kids doing that when I was young. Back to before that, I was wondering, Rhonda, what do you think she thought about her mom leaving Tracey all that money, I wonder?
No, so she left Rhonda some money too, as well as Rhonda's adoptive sister. She had a sister named Darrell. So everybody got some money, but Tracey got more than everybody else. So I don't think anybody was too unhappy, but I really didn't unwrap anything about that. Also, getting back to Allie, the little sister, she also recounts one day they come home and Tracey tells everybody, "Hey, the old cat died and I buried it in the backyard." And it was an old cat, so no reason to be suspicious. But Allie was suspicious, and Allie and one of her friends went and dug up the dead cat, and it had a hole in its head, which indicated to Allie that that cat did not die of natural causes. So to this day, Allie believes that Tracey killed the cat and buried it in the backyard. So when Tracey was 16, she also had an affair with a friend's husband. And I'm not sure if it was Tracey's friend's husband or the family's friend's husband, but nonetheless, Tracey had an affair with a married man, got pregnant. She had an abortion and moved out of the house shortly thereafter. And she went to live with a family friend named Kay Weary. So Kay, when interviewed later on, she said that Tracey was a nice kid. She was courteous and a good Catholic. And that was really in contradiction to pretty much all the other reports of Tracy's behavior during those teen years. During those years, people described Tracy as sexually aggressive. She behaved very strangely and was actually expelled from school for sexually molesting other classmates. Just to give you a description of her, Tracy was a large woman. She was 6'1". She weighed over 200 pounds. She was a big gal. And she was kind of intimidating in her presence. In 1982, she was 17 and she cut off all her hair and told others to refer to her as Bobby. She also began dressing in biker clothing, so like black leather type clothing and studs and that stuff. When she started receiving her inheritance at age 18, I think she got half of it when she was 18 and another half when she was 21. But when she got that first half, she was not wise with her money. She spent it all on socializing and on a motorcycle.
I can see her riding a motorcycle.
Yeah. Avril and George, when raising Rhonda, I forgot to mention Darrell. I did mention. So Darrell is described. So even though you've got Avril and George, these are the grandparents, and they adopted Rhonda and Darrell. And then Rhonda had Tracy, but then Tracy was adopted by George and Avril. So essentially, Tracy became Darrell's sister, even though she could have also been her niece. Anyway, Avril was also an adopted child. So remember the horrible grandmother? She was adopted. She was sexually abused by her uncle, who was her adoptive parent, after Avril's biological parents split up and decided they couldn't raise her either. So remember I said there's a theme here. Isn't that weird? You become a single parent and you can't. People do it all the time. But for some reason in Australia back then, they couldn't. So as a teen, Avril, the horrible grandma, was raped by a family friend and left on a railroad track to die. So it kind of explains why Avril was a horrible person, but she really passed that on. So anyway, I wanted to mention that.
It's worth mentioning. Patterns of abuse.
Exactly. Another thing, Avril could not have children. So that's why they adopted Rhonda and Darrell. Another thing about the grandpa, George, he was a self-made millionaire. But like I mentioned before, that marriage was a disaster. And I guess they could afford to buy two houses because they hated each other. Rhonda, remember, she's interviewed and says, Avril and Dad, they were horrible people. But why would she give her daughter up to adoption?
To horrible people. Exactly. I thought that too.
It's very strange. Anyway, I'll get back to Tracy. So Tracy is out of school. She didn't really continue with her education. She got a job as a bouncer at a nightclub. And at this nightclub, she met this lady named Sunshine. And Sunshine and Tracy became lovers. They were romantically involved and moved in with one another. They married through a Hare Krishna ceremony, and they decided they wanted to have a baby. She had sex with the club owner. That's who got Tracy pregnant so they could fulfill this dream of being a couple with a child. But Tracy then miscarried. This miscarriage is what some say led to her completely abandoning her Catholic faith and becoming interested in witchcraft, also the occult and black magic. So that miscarriage is what led to that, but maybe it was the upbringing, who knows. Tracy at this time started communicating with a white witch in Adelaide, Australia. I looked up a white witch. A white witch is someone who practices benevolent or healing magic using their craft to help protect and bring positive energy to others in the world. So they sound like good people. They're not there to be mean, I don't think. So for some reason, the relationship with Sunshine went south and it ended in 1989. But Tracy moved on quickly. Within 2 months, she had moved from Brockhampton to Northwest Brisbane. She worked in a factory and lived in an apartment. She became reclusive. She started referring to herself as Fred. She began carrying a black cloth bag that had tarot cards in it, animal bones, and candles. And she began using animal blood from butcher shops as well as her own blood. So she cut herself and used the blood to draw symbols on her body as well as on the walls of her apartment. She loved watching horror movies and watched scenes where people maimed and killed, where they were maimed and killed, and she would watch them over and over. So the goriest scenes of movies, she would just watch over and over again. Yeah, she was kind of crazy.
She was heading that way for sure.
She was heading that way, but she met someone who shared some similarities. A lady named Donna. That was her new girlfriend. And again, within 2 months of breaking up from Sunshine, she and Donna had moved in with each other. The more Tracey became reclusive, the more obsessed she became with all things occult. She started saying to people, including Donna, "I'm a vampire and I'm sensitive to sunlight." She started to say she couldn't stand any sort of religious symbols, so crucifixes or anything religious, she would get all, eh. And she would tell people, "I need to feed on animal blood." She told friends that she was only living off the blood of pigs and goats that she was getting from the local butcher shop.
Gross. But, that's what a vampire does, I guess.
I guess. So Donna and Tracey lived together, and according to reports, the walls of their apartment were decorated with pictures of graveyards, occult symbols, and a stolen headstone from a graveyard.
Oh,
I know.
those are expensive. Some family had to replace that.
Exactly. So even though she's in this cohabitative relationship with Donna, they live together, Tracey's having a fling on the side. A lady named Lisa Petsensky. Lisa was quite the catch. She suffered from mental health issues and was a heroin addict.
Okay, I thought you were going to.
I'm sorry. Make light.
I thought you were going to be serious.
She'd been hospitalized over 80 times in the last 5 years for self-harm and drug overdoses.
Oh,
But somehow those two really clicked. And Lisa was drawn to Tracey's dark side. She had also been involved in the occult and sacrificing goats. Good times. So Lisa said that she would wear a tourniquet, cut herself, and let Tracey suck on her blood. So those two, so Tracey and Lisa then met another lesbian couple, and this was Kim Jervis and Tracey Waugh. They were both 23. I think Tracey is 25 and Lisa's 24. So they're all in their early 20s. One day, Tracey Waugh, she saw Tracey Wigginton break a cross. And she believed at that point that Tracey was a destroyer who had the power to rip the arms off of anyone who would try to stop Tracey feeding on blood. Tracey was very impressionable, I guess. She was a very shy Catholic schoolgirl, and she believed Tracey Wigginton was the devil's bride. I mean, really impressionable, I suppose.
yes, very.
She also believed that Tracey Wigginton was telepathic and could make her own body disappear.
Considering she was 6'1" and over 200 pounds, that's a big...
That's a feat.
That's a feat, yes.
Tracey Wigginton, she had tattoos. One of them was her Leo sign on the back of her hand.
Oh,
So
really?
she had her astrological sign tattooed on the back of her hand. We know a few Leos, don't we?
We know a lot of them, yes.
They're not horrible people, but I want to hear more about the astrology. So
We'll get there. Yeah.
we'll get there. So Tracey Wigginton considered herself to be a white witch and had to consume blood to maintain her witch aspect. Tracey Waugh, Lisa, and Kim all said Tracey Wigginton had to avoid mirrors and was capable of casting spells on them. Tracey told the group that she could not eat solid food and survive solely on blood. Before the murder, she and her mom had made up. And Tracey still said, at some point, I'm going to make my mom pay because that was a horrible childhood and it's her fault. And I kind of get that.
It was her fault.
But Rhonda was later interviewed, Mom Rhonda, and she said, Tracey ate food. We went out to dinner like 2 weeks before this murder, and she ate all the food in front of her. So that's BS. Rhonda, mom, she claimed Tracey's problems began when she became part of the Brisbane lesbian community. So mom was really not accepting of her homosexuality, which is kind of sad. Anyway, so I'm going to get to the murder. On Friday, October 20th, 1989, Tracey Wigginton, Tracey Waugh, Lisa, and Kim Jervis, they went drinking at a lesbian nightclub. They got drunk and then cruised around town searching for a victim. Tracey Wigginton told the group she needed to find someone to feed off of. So these girls are all driving around, and one report I read was the other three thought Tracey was joking, but let's keep going. So while they're driving around drunk, they encounter Eddie Baldock. He's a 47-year-old married man with 5 kids. He was also a grandfather. And according to 60 Minutes Australia, Tracey claimed she was a hungry vampire trying to find some blood to stay alive. And they saw him stumbling out of a club drunk that night. And it was his favorite club, a place called Caledonian Society and Burns Club.
It's a long nightclub name.
And they somehow convinced him, and I think it was through the offer of sexual favors, they convinced him to get into the car with him. And of note, again, according to 60 Minutes Australia, he had just celebrated his 25th anniversary with his wife 2 weeks ago, or 2 weeks prior. So that's kind of a happy anniversary to you.
Yeah. And, also alcohol does not always lead to the best decisions. So, yeah.
Really? So they took advantage of his intoxicated state, lured him into the car, and they drove to a park on the Brisbane River near the South Brisbane Sailing Club at West End. And it was at this location that Tracey Wigginton enticed him from the vehicle. So they went down to the riverbanks and they were sitting on the rocks and they started to undress. And she goes back to the car and says, "Hey, he's strong. I'm going to need some help." So 2 of the girls, Lisa and Kim, they get out of the car and go back down to the riverbank with Tracey Wigginton. Tracey Waugh, the shy Catholic schoolgirl, stays in the car and she's like, "I don't want to have anything to do with this." They're sitting on down by the riverbank. It's Kim and Lisa and Tracey and Eddie Baldock. Tracey Wigginton goes back to the car, leaves the other 2 girls there, and gets Kim's knife. So Kim Jervis is a petite person, and she's said to carry around a knife for protection. Tracey goes to retrieve her knife out of the car, goes back down to the riverbank, and by this time, Baldock is completely naked except for his socks. And Tracey walks up behind him and he says, "Hey, what are you doing?" And she says, "Nothing," and then stabs him in the back of the skull, back of the neck. It was pretty gruesome too. She stabbed him over 20 times, cutting his carotid artery, his jugular vein, virtually decapitated him. She then fed on him, literally stuck her face in the open wound on his neck and fed on him, drank his blood. It's horrible. So his body was discovered. And so the 3 of them left. And actually, while Tracey was feeding on him, I think the other 2 left and went to the car. But anyway, his body is discovered the next morning by members of the public. Found in one of his shoes was a cash card bearing the name Tracey Wigginton. So she left her debit card behind.
That's crazy.
But apparently before the body was discovered, Tracey realized, "I lost my bank card," and went back to the park and looked around for it and couldn't find it. And the reason she couldn't find it was stuffed in his shoe.
I wonder how it got there.
Yeah, some speculate that someone set Tracey up, but who knows? So, of course, after the police find her card, they want to contact her, and they did. They interview her, they take her to the scene, and she actually lied at first and told police that she'd been down by the river the previous day. So her card, she lost it then, but she had nothing to do with the murder. But she remained on their radar because Lisa, remember the one with the 80 hospitalizations?
Yes.
She was talking to people about the murder. She was telling people this happened. And her friends were like, dude, you got to go to the police. And she did. She turned herself in. She told the police what happened, and all 4 women were arrested and interrogated. The other 3 claimed, hey, we're all under Tracey Wigginton's spell. I don't know. That's crazy.
I would hightail it in that situation. If they were going to do that, I'd be like, I'm not going along for this ride.
Yeah, I'm not going along with this.
Even the Catholic Tracey got arrested.
Yeah, even the Catholic Tracey. I think she is an accessory to this crime. But wait, you'll see what happens. The police searched Tracey's car. They found the towel that was used to wipe off Eddie's blood off of Tracey's hands and off the knife. I mean, they had everything they needed, right? On that 60 Minutes Australia episode that I was telling you about, you can see her interrogation room episode. You can see Tracey talking to the police. And once she finally cracked and started telling the truth, they asked him, where did you stab him first? And she said, in the back of the head, pointing at the base of the skull. And they asked, how hard did you stab him? She said, hard enough to drive the knife up to the hilt, which I had to look up. What exactly does that mean? The most common usage in the phrase to the hilt, this idiom refers to thrusting a sword into something so deep that only the handle, the hilt, I didn't know that's what that was.
I did. Ew, when you said it, I was like, oh.
So only the hilt remained exposed. She said, I then withdrew the knife and stabbed him in the other side of the neck and continuously stabbed him. She also said he was making a gargling sound, so I knew the blood was coming out of his mouth. I then sat down in front of him and watched him die. And one report I read said she was smoking a cigarette, just watching him die.
Yeah, I read that she just sat there, watched him die, and smoked a cigarette.
Yeah. So the case was scheduled to go to trial. There was a lot of testimony. And during the testimony, Tracey told, I'm not sure if she told the court or a jury, it came out that she could not live on solid food. She was drinking blood. Tracey and Lisa would slit wrists so that Wigginton could drink her blood. Based on her obsession for human blood, all 4 women schemed up to plan to kill an innocent victim in order for Tracey to have her craving of blood satisfied. So this is what she testified to. It was all of this information that made police say, okay, we got you. And it came out during trial, I believe. There was a psychiatric evaluation of Tracey, which revealed she had 4 to 5 separate personalities. One was an innocent little girl. Number 2 was adult Tracey. 3rd was angry homicidal Bobby. 4th, an observer who watched over the other personalities. And the 5th one was Avril, the reincarnation of her grandma. So yeah, she had multiple personalities, which I read is quite, I wouldn't say common, but somewhat common for people that experience severe trauma, severe childhood trauma like sexual abuse.
Right. Especially because you have to, I would imagine in the situation, you have to sort of leave yourself to get through it.
Exactly.
If you're not able to escape or fight back, you just have to leave yourself. And so that makes sense that it would be something that's common with people that experience trauma.
And one of the experts said the personalities that she has that would be capable of doing this would have been Bobby, angry homicidal Bobby, or Avril, the reincarnation of her wicked grandmother. Anyway, it didn't actually go to a jury because Tracey ended up pleading guilty. They must have gotten into the trial, but then she decided, I'm just going to plead guilty. I don't know what happened, but she was sentenced, get this, to life in prison. And in Australia, life in prison means you go to prison for 20 years or less with a minimum of 13 years being served.
So it's not life in prison.
I mean, whose life is 20 years?
Yeah. I mean,
okay, well, yeah. She was 25 at the time.
She was going to make it to 45, yes.
Right, and get out of prison. The other 3 went to trial. Tracey was, so the Catholic schoolgirl that stayed in the car, she was found not guilty and set free, which is kind of BS because she was riding around with them. I think she's an accessory to the crime. Why didn't she get out of the car and go tell somebody?
Exactly.
Kim Jervis, she's the little one with the knife. She was found guilty of manslaughter and sentenced to 18 years, but that was later reduced to 12. So she got out after 12 years. And then Lisa, she also got life, which meant she had to do 20 years, but 13 at a minimum. So now Tracey's in prison, right? She's eligible for parole every few years. And it was during one of these parole hearings where she was denied parole. They spoke to her sister, Allie. Remember her little sister? Allie, she told the press, she said, I am very fearful for myself and my 3 children. She said, it's time to tell people she is a dangerous woman. I've got every right to be scared and scared for my kids. She wished there had been capital punishment when Tracey pleaded guilty in 1991. We would have been able to grieve and Mom would have been able to get on with her life. When she was denied parole, Allie, the little sister, said, I was elated. I felt safe. I don't want her to come out because she is unstable. She says that Wigginton or Tracey's horrific crime and jailing has ongoing repercussions for her and her family. She said after this happened, Allie was unable to talk to just friends. People abandoned her. People would avoid her walking down the street.
I would imagine I would be scared.
I would be scared too. So she also said she kept letters and a poem written by Tracey. And she said, I've seen changes in my sister, who is now known as Fred, in prison.
So another personality came out.
So another personality. And then Allie also said as she became more used to the prison system, she became kingpin of the place and she loved it. Allie said that when her sister next applied for parole from prison, she would write a letter to Queensland Parole Board asking that she not be released. But apparently that didn't work because Tracey was paroled. I believe it was 2012. After being denied parole 4 times, in 2012, she was released from prison.
And so she did almost the whole 20 years, right?
2012 was 22 years after the murder, I believe. Yeah.
Okay, so she did over 20.
Yeah. So she told the parole board when she was released, she told the parole board that Edward Baldock's family had forgiven her, which was not true. They had not forgiven her. So she lied to the parole board, but even though she was released. And then in 2019, it was reported that Tracey was posting pictures of vampires on social media, also posting witches, demons, bones. One post that she made said, do not meddle with the affairs of dragons as you are crunchy and good with ketchup. Another post said, now panic because I'm back, fuckers.
Yep, I had that in my notes to talk about too, but you beat me to it.
What the hell?
I'm back, fuckers.
And then what I can tell is Tracey currently goes by Fred. So like Allie said a few years ago. By the way, Lisa was released after 17 years. Kim was released after 12 years. My sources for this information were that 60 Minutes Australia episode. There's also this funny podcast out there. It's 2 lesbians talk murder. It's these 2 lesbian girls. They're kind of funny. They might be stoned. I can't really tell, but they laugh a lot. And then just multiple news articles. And that is the story of Tracey. And I'm glad she lives in Australia because I'm scared of her.
Me too. What's the name of that podcast?
It's called 2 Lesbians Talk Murder.
Oh, I love it. Okay, I'm going to have to look that one up. There's not a lot of stuff made on her, like movies or anything like that.
But what a great topic.
Yeah, what a great topic. And it's such gothic horror, like Anne Rice gone wrong, you know? So, yeah. So I was just going to jump into this. So, like, Australian press was the one that branded her the lesbian vampire killer. And it's a nickname that sold newspapers, obviously, you know, detailed the myth. And since she was an occult enthusiast, there was all kinds of hubbub around stores and things like that. This has appeared in numerous crime documentaries, YouTube retrospectives, which I watched one of those. Lots of podcasts, like you said, couple television specials, including an episode of Deadly Women and the documentary type style program called Lesbian Vampire Killer, Tracey Wigginton. Couple books, Ron Hicks, The Vampire Killer, examines the investigation and trial and a little bit of the woman behind the headlines. A 2018 account explored what acquaintances described as the many different versions of Tracey, as you know, you're talking about her different personalities. There was a Facebook true crime world that kept the story alive the whole time. One widely shared post called it the bizarre case of Tracey Wigginton, adding into an entirely new generation to one of Australia's most infamous murders. Anyway, so not a lot of stuff that I found, except for obviously some good podcasts and some good YouTube videos. Let's go ahead and jump into the astrology. I didn't know she had a Leo tattoo. That's kind of cool. So Tracey Wigginton, born August 4th, 1965, and that starts with Sun in Leo. And if there's ever a sign associated with creating mythology around itself, it's Leo, the larger than life side.
What do you mean creating mythology around themselves?
Well, she claimed to be a vampire.
Gotcha.
Plus, being, a Leo, she gave 2 statements that really are pure Leo shadow energy. When asked why she did it, she said, to prove I was a vampire. That was one of the responses. And then she said, it's hard to be famous, isn't it? A legend in my own mind. That was one of her quotes. Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a Leo energy. So anyway, then we have our moon in Scorpio. Leo rules the stage. Scorpio rules the underworld. So Scorpio is associated with death, taboo, blood, transformation, obsession, secrecy, and our fascination with what society fears. So traditional astrology links Scorpio with the 8th house, the house of mortality, darkness, hidden desires, and the psychological depths we'd often rather avoid. And this doesn't mean Scorpio moons are dangerous. Most are not, obviously. But symbolically, if you were writing like a gothic novel about a woman obsessed with vampirism, you might want to give her a Scorpio moon. The moon describes our emotional landscape, and Scorpio feels intensely and often privately it seeks truth through extremes. It's drawn toward what others find frightening or forbidden. And now her Mars, her action planet, is in Libra. And it seems kind of out of place because Libra is the sign of relationships and balance. And Mars often operates, impulsively rather than balance. It persuades, it recruits, it seeks allies. And this crime wasn't committed in isolation. 3 other women were involved. And finally, Venus in Virgo adds a strange layer. Venus tells us what we value and how we express affection. Virgo is meticulous, ritualistic, and detail-oriented. And investigators noted details that still unsettle people today. The victim's clothes folded neatly nearby, the calmness that followed extraordinary violence, and the cigarette, while he was dying. So Virgo can compartmentalize. It creates order amid chaos. And, again, you're not born a criminal. Obviously, it's a lot of environmental factors. It's just symbolism. And in Tracey Wigginton's chart, the symbolism reads like Gothic literature itself. The lion who wanted to become a legend, the moon drawn to the forbidden, and the warrior who acted through a group, and the perfectionist who maintained composure in the midst of horror. So there you go.
Oh, wow.
That's her chart.
I can't believe she's out walking free. It's so bizarre. In America, that would not happen. But we do have a messed up prison system, so.
We have a for-profit prison system. So yeah, they don't get out. They want to keep them in, That's a whole nother podcast that we can talk about. Not getting into politics here. Yeah, I mean, just the fact that she went on Facebook and was like, I'm back, and like posted pictures of like bones and skulls and stuff like that. I'd be scared. Could you imagine like you find out she's your neighbor? I'd be like, oh, I'm out.
Let's move to Perth.
Oh my goodness. Well, thanks for doing this and happy Pride.
Happy Pride Month, everybody.
Yes. Bye, Kay.
Bye, Stacey.
The Femme Fatal, created and hosted by Stacey Dotson. Produced by Mark Williams. Music by Marcia Yingling, Chad Shank, and Greg Loicano.